Catalyzing Change Week is proudly organized by our incredible members at Catalyst Now. As we launch this year's edition, I'm delighted to introduce Sanjoy Roy, member and co-chair of our organizing committee, as well as co-chair of our movement's global governing council. He also is a social entrepreneur and a cultural entrepreneur in his own very big right, and a newly minted author, which is very exciting. We're deeply grateful for the dedication and hard work of the entire Catalyzing Change Week committee, whose efforts have made this year's edition possible and truly inspiring. Please join me in welcoming Sanjoy Roy.
Join us on a journey of discovery across 200 sessions and over 400 speakers from across the world. Sharing their vision, mission, innovations, and achievements. At Catalyzing Change Week, the largest convening of social innovators online. Connect, share, and learn from the best in the ecosystem. Brought to you by Catalyst Now. Thank you so much, Frederick, and welcome everybody on behalf of the co-chairs of Catalyst Now, Dr. Wamayu, Karen, and Cheryl, and all of our committee members at CCW, and of course, Frederick and Gabby, our CEOs and co-facilitators. Welcome to this edition of CCW 2025. We're absolutely delighted that we were able to program over 163 sessions. We had many sessions that we received from our members, but we finally sort of drilled down and we looked at these 163 sessions, broke them up into different themes that we will go through. These are across 7 different languages. We're going to have over 466 speakers, and these are going to be across 110 countries. Our themes for the Catalyzing Change Week 2025 include some of the key issues that we felt needed to be drilled down into. So we're looking at mental health and well-being, art for social change, which is on the Monday today. On the Tuesday, which is tomorrow, we're looking at issues around climate, water, integrational innovation, cities, and livelihood. On the Wednesday, we've got technology and AI and the future of work, as well as faith-based innovation. On the Thursday, we've got civic participation, peace and justice, and most importantly, in today's context, refugees and migrants, even as the world is seeing more and more people having to flee hunger, violence, and widespread destruction and war. On the last day, which is Friday, we move to innovation and education. Education, as we all know, is going to be the way forward. It's the way that we're going to equip ourselves to find solutions to many of these issues that I've stated. And we know that every person who's educated and receives a considered education really goes a long way in finding innovative solutions and helping us achieve some of the targets. In all of this, don't forget that one of our key roles in Catalyst Now is to just make sure that it's a platform for collaboration, for interaction, and for empathy, and a place that we can listen to each other and interact with each other. A big shout out to Madeline and Frederick and all our colleagues at the Secretariat of Catalyst Now for doing this amazing work of putting this together. To many of our founders, and we've got a slide coming up with their logos shortly. And remember, Catalyst Now is this is our ecosystem partners and our partners and supporters. So thanks to them, we're able to make much of this happen. And just a little note about Catalyst Now, for those of you who may have joined and not been part of the movement, we are a dynamic global movement of social entrepreneurs covering every continent. We are looking at having one or two penguin organizations also join our movement so that we have a breadth and width across every continent. But we're looking at transforming systems and driving sustainable change to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals worldwide. We create spaces where the world's social innovators connect, collaborate, and contribute to transformational change. Remember, if you need to join us, you can do so. You can just write into us. You can go onto our website, and we hope sooner or later we'll have the pleasure of hosting you on Catalyst Now. Thank you so much, and over to Colin, who's going to be today leading our session. Colin, apart from everything, is also the co-chair of our communication strategy. So thank you, Colin, for everything. And over to you guys. Have a fabulous conversation and session today. Colin is also a founding member of Catalyst Now, and of course, the moderator of this wonderful session. And he will introduce our panelists for today. Colin, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sanjoy. Thank you, Frederick. Yeah, you got it. There's a number of ways actually to interact today. I would say, throw your questions into the text box, and we'll try to pull out a few of them at the end of the session, towards the end of the session. So my name's Colin McElwee. Yeah, I'm one of the early members of this organization. I'm your moderator for this session today, which in theory means you're not going to hear very much from me unless our speakers go well over time. But luckily, we've got three great speakers, very well trained and disciplined speakers. And I'm going to introduce them to you. Dr. Wamuyu Mahinda. She's the founding partner of Collaborative Value Partners Africa, chairperson of Africa Forward, and she's also the co-chair of Catalyst Now and part of the governing council. I asked each of our speakers to give us a little bit of a personal note and to get to know them a little bit better. Dr. Wamayu is a rural girl who took up a near impossible mission of creating opportunities for youth work in Africa. Her quest for solutions has formed several organizations, designed many programs, and through all this, her greatest asset is social capital, she believes. She's learned that real power doesn't lie in what you do, but in who believes in you, collaborates with you, and walks with you to make the impossible possible. Welcome, Wamuyu. David Bombright, he's a member of the global leadership group of Ashoka. David was a young program officer at the Oak Foundation when he met Bill Drayton, widely recognized as the father of social entrepreneurship. And he met him in 1987 and was introduced to the idea of social entrepreneurship. David says that he was so identified with the concept that he quit his job as a funder and began what became a lifelong career as a champion of new ideas. He says his greatest joy now comes from seeing young people step into their power as change makers for the good of all. And then last and certainly not least, Jeru Bilimoria. She's currently the convener for an organization I hope she's going to tell us all about, the Government Council for Social Innovation. She's the co-founder of One Family Foundation, and she's very, very modest about this. She's really the visionary and the founder of Catalyst. And Jeru is just another powerhouse. And she says she's, well, this was a description of her, that she's a great cook. Her best ideas and conversations are held over the stove. She's dedicated her career to empowering children and young people, driving systemic change worldwide. She's the co-founder of One Family and has been the chief facilitator, the boss in inverted commas, of Catalyst Now since 2019 to last year. She's now putting her energy to work with governments to embed social innovation into the heart of public policy, finance, and service delivery. So with that, I'm going to give each of our speakers around 10 minutes each for an initial offering, and I'm just going to set this up in, if you like, in 30 seconds. In Q1 of this year, the US government took a decision which has triggered the most severe disruption to development assistance since World War II. I mean, crisis indeed. So the question is, what role does social innovation or social innovators have in not just helping plug gaps in funding and impact, but also perhaps reimagining how development assistance and impact should be in the future? Jeru, I'm passing straight over to you.
Thank you. And I think I look at it as an opportunity. The sector needed to change. We needed to look at how we could do things differently. And I think that's where I think for us, the sector is really taking hold. I see a lot of new innovations, a lot of new energy which is emerging. And for me, that is probably the first and the most important thing that we have. So out of every crisis comes innovation. And out of this development crisis, think we'll see the largest leapfrogging in innovation that we have ever seen. Yes, it may hurt a bit now, but I really see optimism. And I think what's really wonderful is it's juxtapositioned with AI. AI simplifies a lot of tasks. Unfortunately, it also leads to a lot of unemployment, which will be our next battle to tackle. But AI also will help strengthen the sector to be able to see astronomical growth. So whereas I see a huge crisis, being the entrepreneur that I am and being who we are, I see opportunity. So I'm going to get this CCW with a lot of opportunity and hope to see different solutions and innovations, which is going to make us grow stronger over this crisis. So that's my perspective, Colin. Back to you.
Yeah, before we move on, Drew, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about the project that you've just initiated around governance and social innovation. And feel free, you've got about 7 minutes left.
Okay, I speak short. So when we started Catalyst, we wanted to really change government systems, and our main mission, if all of you who are on the call may remember, and many of the founders, was to bring about systems change and change the social innovation ecosystem. Well, I think we did a great job. Our first publication was Crisis to Systems Change in Catalyst. Many of you worked on it. And we did influence governments, but our influence was more based on issues. And every entrepreneur I spoke to, and that's several thousand in this movement, they said, we do great, but we are so focused on this one issue. We wish there was a strong ecosystem. Like the IT sector, they can really lobby their way through, or oil, which holds the world at ransom because they know how to get the right price for their oil. Or now what China is doing with rare earth minerals. They had great lobbying power. We as a sector, through Catalyst, now have that. But I realized that Catalyst created the lobbying power, but there was no system in the government where we could lobby to. There were a ton of fragmented, a ton of fragmented ministries we could go to. Given this, started discussing with many governments, and I had the opportunity, One Family Foundation was given the opportunity to incubate the Government Council for Social Innovation, which was initially started by France, Germany, Portugal, Luxembourg, and Brazil, and Spain. And in Brazil at the G20, we had the first initial approval for it. And then this year in April, it was launched in Luxembourg with what was called the Luxembourg Declaration for Social Innovation. So this was the first time that 51 countries endorsed social innovation, and through the declaration agreed to create a unified social innovation ecosystem in their respective countries. So what does the Government Council do? Many of you all are wondering, is it just some paperwork? No, it's not. It basically is going to try to create a national, and there's a social innovator here, so we need a lot of action. It's trying to create national policies around social innovation. It's mapping the whole social innovation ecosystem in their countries, finding out what are the gaps, looking at regulatory and legislative reform, peer-to-peer learning to accelerate their growth, and most important, looking at new avenues of financing, because many governments, especially in Africa and Asia and Latin America, who have lost the funding thanks to USAID, are now looking at new sources of funding. So we are looking at different case studies to look at how can we get more funding into the sector. So having done all this, what they realized is, the governments realized, is that it's a tough agenda, but how can you simplify it? And this is where AI is being leveraged by the Government Council to create the world's first, currently it's called Solutions Bank, but it may get a new name as the governments decide, to map all the solutions done by social innovation. So far, we have mapped around 1,000 solutions, mainly from Ashoka, Skoll, Schwab, Echoing Green. And these are different unique innovations which are there, which are going to be there. Then we are working, so we've started this work with the EU, where we've created a manual on pathways to working with governments. And now we are looking at which of those solutions could be scaled by governments. So we are looking at that, and we are taking that forward. So what will happen is, this creates an ecosystem where if someone has a phenomenal solution, we can actually take it on and make it into a reality by including it in the government. So this is the Solutions Bank, which is working on that. And then the second thing that we are looking at is working with governments to actually understand their own ecosystem. So the ministries who came in Luxembourg were not able to say who else is working on the same stuff. So now we are actually working with governments to start mapping their own ecosystems. So this is also something which is really helping create it. And I hope that in the next 3 or 5 years of we have a CCW, we'll be talking of a lot of government and social innovation partnerships which have scaled, just like we got in G20 in Africa and the social summit, and now hopefully we'll have social innovations mentioned in the G20 declaration. And I'm sure Mamayu is going to talk way more about it, so I'm not going to, but that's the sort of connections which will help us to grow and create more impact and change the world and take this crisis into an opportunity. That's where I will go. Within my 7 minutes, Colin, I hope.
Totally, absolutely. And over to you, Mamu. You've got 8 to 10 minutes, so feel free.
Thank you, Jero, for starting us off, because I'll build on that, rightfully. As I was thinking about this presentation and where I'm at in my work, both in Africa and globally, and also in Kenya, the questions that came to mind or come to mind is, what is our collective voice and why does it matter? Because we are still working in silos, and we need to ask ourselves why it is important for us to collaborate and work together. And the other question that comes with that in my mind is, how do we as social innovators align? And the work that Jero is doing is part of what is helping us align, because we have things that we do, but nobody knows about the things that we are doing. And the other question that goes with that is, what is our strategy? How do we get to make sure that we align with the world and what they're doing? And I want to give an example of my experience, because sometimes it's better when you give examples of where you're at. Now we have the AgriConnect initiative, which is a World Bank initiative that is a global one in Africa and in Asia and other parts of the world. And we have AgriConnect in Kenya. And this initiative aims at transforming the agricultural sector by generating more and better jobs. And specifically in Kenya, it is aiming to create 5.3 million jobs. And obviously, for me, who is very excited about opportunities for job creation, AgriConnect came to my mind. Then I thought, as I was sitting where I was sitting, how do I get there? How do we plug in as social innovators? Because this is World Bank talking to Kenya government and other governments, and the social innovators are there talking about their innovation, but not getting into these big things that really do make the difference. So as I was thinking about that, I thought about the SSC, that is the Social Solidarity Economy, there's a resolution that was put together in 2023. And in my mind, I felt that does give us a passport, because initially some people didn't even know about us. But after the resolution, people are beginning to understand that we are important people, because a whole UN resolution has been put aside to recognize us. So this SSC gives us legitimacy. It also gives us language and framing, and as well as entry points. So we feel that we can actually go to a government and talk about who we are and why we should be involved in what they're doing. But coming from my background, where I know that that's not that straightforward, I asked myself again, what is the strategy? How do we fit in this? And one of the things I keep on saying about social innovators and social entrepreneurs is that we are a glue. I mean, we kind of know how to do this thing. When government needs, for example, talking about, say, for example, policy, regulations, and public goods, we as social innovators know how to translate that into, pilot projects that deliver. When private sector guys come and talk about market access, technology, finance, we, the social innovators, are the glue, and we build inclusive business models that lower risk. When it comes to development partners, again, we are the ones who localize the investment and translate global goals into impact. So when I think about us as the glue, I'm right, because we play the role that brings us to the heart of SSC, and that is collaboration, solidarity, and shared value creation. With that in mind, I walked into the Ministry of Agriculture and I said, I'm aware that we have AgriConnect in Kenya. We are the social innovators working in the area of youth jobs, and would like to partner with you. And as I went there, I had put up a 4-step, what I call glue up strategy, because we are the glue. So we came up with a strategy. So the first step of that glue is we claim our recognition as social innovators. 2 is we align our national and global frameworks. 3, we co-create value. And 4, advocate. So I made sure that as I went to the Ministry of Agriculture, and I used our networks to ensure that I got an appointment. By the way, I don't know about your countries, but in my country, getting an appointment to sit with the cabinet secretary is not a walk in the park. But it happened. And I went there and I ensured that social innovators are officially recognized as key actors, not just in AgriConnect, but generally speaking. And this was a meeting that was very effective. And by doing that, I was actually introduced to the people who are working in AgriConnect, and I was invited into their meetings thereafter. So in their meetings, I went to point 2, the second strategy, which is aligning with the national and global frameworks. I made sure that as social innovators, we are saying, we have solutions. We know how to do this. We have, in fact, tried and tested solutions that we can bring to the ministry and ensure that we work with them. The third strategy was to align with the actors, because you cannot go there and show off and say, we are social innovators, we know this thing, we've done this thing. It must be that we are positioning ourselves as the glue that translates policy into projects and that fills the gaps that we see as we partner with this. And the fourth point that I raised up, or the 4-step glue up strategy, is advocate and amplify. Part of what we're doing at CCW, where we come here and we talk about what we're doing, use our collective voice to influence, as well as embed our solutions in frameworks that are either working in our countries or in other parts of the region. So that's the first 4-step glue up strategy that I will be sharing with other social innovators, because I'm very proud of the strategy and I believe that it works. And as a result, as I close, one of the things that came up as a result of that, as I was thinking about the four-step strategy, is a call to action that I want to bring to CCW. And I'm saying here that as social innovators and social entrepreneurs, let us stand up as the glue that binds governments, private sector, and development partners, guided by the UN resolution at the social and solidarity economy. We want to call on global initiatives like AgriConnect to recognize, resource, and replicate SSE-driven programs that deliver youth development, climate resilience, and shared prosperity. Thank you. Thank you, Colin, for that space.
No, thank you. That's wonderful. I'll just remind people to put some questions in the text box as they occur to you. David, over to you.
Well, thank you, Colin, and thank you, Dr. Wamuyu and Jiru. It's a pleasure to be able to try to build on what you're saying. And I think what I want to focus on builds nicely on a common theme that's kind of implicit in what you're doing, but I want to honor it, which is demonstrating how we as innovators in civil society are reaching out to and guiding the other sectors to model what it takes to work collaboratively. I want to focus in on that theme of what does it take to really make collaboration the norm of how we behave and not the exception. I think that the fact that Catalyst now is a beautiful example of that, and everyone here on this call is giving their time and their heads and their hearts to learn together about collaboration. And I think that's very important to recognize and say that's actually the stuff of what we're doing, is the way we show up. And believe me, we have a fight on our hands because there are so many obstacles to collaboration. The normal way we operate, the way the systems that we live in work, tend to be competitive and individualistic rather than collaborative. Let's take the example of funding. The prevailing approaches to funding in our sector strongly make it single organizations, like all the ones that we work in, compete for funding over the alternative, which would be to come together to collaborate for impact. So if we expect funding to promote collaboration, we're going to have to change the incentives in the funding system to support collaboration. What does that look like? What kind of innovations could we do to funding models to make them supportive of collaboration? And that's a live question. I don't know of any great answers out there for that, and I'm very interested to hear what people think about that question. Relatedly, if we're going to come up with innovations to promote collaboration, we need to change the way we balance the interests of our own organizations, if you will, organizational self-interest, with the interests of all the other actors in the ecosystem, to respect what they are contributing as well as to what we are contributing, and to learn how to create a common vision. I want to illustrate this with a story about a planning tool that I'm sure everyone on this call knows and does not need to be defined, and that's theory of change. So I was around in the 1980s and early 90s when theory of change emerged as a tool for planning and acting, and in particularly mediating relationships between social innovators and funders. And in the early 2000s, the organization I founded and was working with at the time, Keystone Accountability, introduced its own theory of change planning tool. And when we did that, we were consciously trying to use theory of change planning to get beyond my organization's theory of change, to get to the ecosystem theory of change. And here's what we did. We published a tool that took you through all the usual steps that I'm sure you've gone through around finding a theory of change, setting out your goal, mapping the environment, making your assumptions about the problem, talking about the activities that you were going to undertake, all the classic steps in a logical theory of change. But we added a piece that was new. And that was, we said, once you have mapped your stakeholders, and you have made some assumptions about what they are doing and how they are contributing to the change that you're expecting to see in the world in your theory of change. Stop, pause, and go to those stakeholders and say, hey, we have a theory of change. This is what we are doing. This is what we think you are doing. And this is how we think those things come together to create this change in the world. So what we found out over 10 years was that when organizations actually did this, something very interesting happened. And I imagine you can all start to imagine what that was. It was, of course, that when you go to people and tell them what you think they are going to do to contribute to your theory of change, they kind of go, well, maybe, but, and then they talk about what they are doing. And then begins a conversation that's not my organization and your organization, but collectively our organizations and how we together can actually cause this change in the world. So I tell this story to point to the way we need new tools. In that case, it's a planning tool if we're going to make collaboration the new norm. To kind of wrap up, I want to talk about what I think is the most powerful opportunity we have right now to innovate again, to push for a more collaborative approach toward doing social change. And this is the whole area of measurement. There's a famous phrase from the measurement literature, what gets measured gets managed. And I've found this to be somewhat true. But measurement indicators are for sure signals of what we value and what we're reaching for, the things we're trying to achieve, our goals. So I asked myself, what are the most important things that we could be measuring today to advance our vision at Catalyst Now for collaboration? What evidence do we need to push this revolution that we're part of to support our movement? And to jump ahead to the answer, my answer to the question is we need evidence of our capabilities, and particularly our capabilities to collaborate. I'm going to say more about that, but I want to tell you how I reached and I got to capabilities. So I look back over what's been going on in the way of evidence and reporting around evidence for impact and if over the last 50 years. And if you go back to the 60s and the 1970s, the focus was on inputs and outputs. So the funders wanted to know is the money that we're giving you being spent for the purposes that it was given? And that's where things were in the 60s. In the 70s, we started to report about our outputs, the activities and their immediate consequences. If you were running a training course, you reported and measured and reported how many people attended how many courses, for example, simple outputs. Then in the 80s, it started to get more complicated as people from the world of economics started to bring different analytical tools, things like cost benefit analysis and return on investment. And they started to look at how you analyze inputs against outputs to get some idea of effectiveness. And that was really what was going on in the 80s. And that was the time when funders were mainly using evaluation to do ex post studies after they'd funded something when they wanted to move out and do research to see what they might do next. So the evaluative work wasn't really aimed at helping us do a better job in our day-to-day work. It was aimed for the funders to try to figure out what they were going to do next. In the 90s, I call that the decade of outcomes. So this was the question in the time when people started to ask the question, okay, we made the inputs, we've got these outputs, what's changed? What's happening? What is the outcome? And that precipitated a massive growth in M&E, monitoring and evaluation. And that's when programs of M&E started to really grow up in all of our organizations because we needed it to be able to manage the funding that was coming in. And a whole new set of acronyms emerged. There was M&E, and then there was MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And then there's even MEAL, monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, and on and on. You could keep going. There's quite a few more. And the other thing that happened in the 90s was the importation of evaluation methods from the field of medicine in the form of randomized controlled trial studies, which was this promise that you could actually establish causation and you could know, if I do this, then that happens. And this grew up to be a big conversation, and the people who were promoting randomized controlled trial studies ultimately won the Nobel Prize for this work. But it didn't really help the practical problem of what I do Monday morning in my work to drive impact and change. And so alongside the growth of randomized controlled trial studies, you saw an explosion of evaluation methodology innovation and some really cool methods like outcome mapping and most significant change emerged then. So then you get to the 2000s. And that's when things really started to get crazy. We're in a new century, and the complexity is growing, and a whole set of new ideas emerged into the social space from the business world, where lots of people had made a ton of money in tech and in finance, and they turned their minds to philanthropy. And this was when the big new wave of foundations started, like the kind of ultimate being the Gates Foundation. And they came along with their business type approaches toward what's important in the way of evidence. And they tended to look at simple indicators like number of homeless people or graduation rates through high schools. And if you go back and look now at, for example, how the Gates Foundation evolved from its early programs on homelessness and education reform, you'll see it took them a decade, but they realized that the single focus type interventions that they were doing were not having the effects that they'd hoped. And they came to a simple conclusion that actually it's more complicated out there than we thought, and single point interventions are not going to do it. And so by 2010 and beyond, there was this growing awareness that these are systemic problems, that we are acting in complex systems, that trying to focus on causation and measure causation is not going to help us. What we really need to do is understand the quality of the interactions that we're having in the system and tweak those elements of how we're relating to each other in order to get better outcomes out of the system. And so all of a sudden we were talking about relationships, mutuality, feedback learning loops, trust, collaboration, alignment. These became, and so over the last 20 years, these are the things that people understand are important. And yet, when you look at how funding is happening, we still haven't fully jumped to a model that honors these things that we now know to be true. And I think that the opportunity we have right now is to develop a rigorous approach toward measuring capabilities around our organizations and in our collaborations that show people in real time how well we're collaborating, for example. And then if we manage to those measures, it will help us actually show over time the connection between how we're collaborating and how we're actually getting to the root causes of the problems that we're trying to solve. So that's just the story I want to tell, and I want to conclude by bringing it back to Catalyst Now, where we're walking the talk on this. So I'm part of Catalyst Now's digital co-op, which is a group of technology tool providers who in another era could have been actively competing with each other to see whose tools could become predominant. But instead, we're collaborating to create a framework or a new operating system for digital infrastructure for collaborative action so that everyone can use this model to organize their approach to working in a more collaborative as opposed to individualistic way. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to put out there. I'd welcome questions from people, and particularly how people see the threads, the common thread between what the three of us have said, because I think there's some strong ones, and it's always fun to get how to understand how these things land with a group of people. So thank you all for listening, and look forward to what follows.
Thanks, David. Yeah, somebody said in the chat, just that potted history is not only so useful, but it's a real learning for all of us around the table that haven't lived all of that. So that was really, really helpful. And you've touched on kind of my follow-up question around Catalyst. Catalyst has been going since 2019. It's a tremendous success in terms of quality and quantity, over 6,000 members, many, many activities going on. As long-time members of Catalyst, what do you think Catalyst now can do better?
I presume this is open to all three of us here.
You can jump in. Yeah.
I mean, I can start. I look at. I almost don't like the question about what we could do better. I mean, what you're really saying is, I mean, I've put out there what I think is strategic and exciting right now, which is to, in lots of different ways, we need to teach the rest of the world how to collaborate. If that's true, first we have to collaborate ourselves and be seen to be collaborative. And I think we're doing that. And I think we could get better at it. But through my engagement in different working groups, I find a strong collaborative spirit. I see trust building over time. It's a human process. And I think that's all kind of moving in the right direction. But that's number one. We need to walk the talk and we need to be collaborative if we're going to show others the way. And then to be strategic, I think you've heard two really great stories about how we're being strategic. And when Dr. Wamuyu goes out and convinces the World Bank and the government of Kenya to do something differently, she brings us with her. The movement of Catalyst now is there. When Giroux and her teams go to governments and try to get them to understand how they have to reorganize themselves to really take full advantage of the power of social innovation, she's doing it, and she expressly said so with Catalyst now standing behind her. So I think the answer, kind of in a way, to your question is look at what these people are doing and do it. All of us, we all need to be doing it. We need to know what everyone else is doing in the way of advancing collaboration as the new way of doing things. And we need to support each other as we do it. But we need to be out there pushing and teaching and showing.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And Giroux, specifically to your current project, I mean, I love the fact that I think you came up with this vision 3 or 4 years ago that we can give ourselves medals, or we're awarded medals as social innovators, but the biggest potential social innovators are in government, for example, and actually recognizing them as social innovators, which I thought was incredibly insightful and powerful. So what do you think? What do you think from a Catalyst Now perspective we can do better?
Document, one word, because I think there are a lot of collaborations which do happen, and I don't think we capture them enough. So I think I can say that. I think it's very, very important to capture what is already happening and to showcase it if we want to focus on strengthening collaborations. I also think we need to structure our collaborations a lot more in terms of, because what initially started, if I look at the history of Catalyst, Catalyst itself is a collaboration. But we never really recommend, we started with documenting it, but I don't think we've done it in the past, now, recently. So documenting Catalyst as a collaboration in itself, I think, is something which we need to do. And we need to look at it in our impact report, because that was the whole lens of Catalyst, collaborative systems change. And I think that's something which we need to be looking at and documenting and taking forward. So I think that's the first thing. Then from that lens, looking at how are the other collaborations, how are they shaping, where do they need to move? And what we had started doing, and I think we can strengthen on, is basically creating an impact measurement on how collaborative systems change works to accelerate systems change, because systems change in itself will get incremental changes. But when you look at collaborative systems change, you get the triple X effect, as I call it, and I think that's what we need to own and document and shape. And then we have experts like David and others, who can look and make that happen. Because even if I look at Africa Forward, and I'm sure Wamayu, or what Wamayu has done, that's the accelerated change which is coming because of collaborations. And that's what we need to highlight, document, and share as widely as possible. That would be my 2 cents worth.
And Dr. Mahinda, what do you
Yes,
think?
thank you. I agree with all the points that have been raised on documentation and in talking more about what we have done and ensuring that it's replicated and scaled. The other challenge I see or rather how we can do this better, I find, for example, we are going to G20 Social Summit in South Africa, because this is the first time that G20 is coming to Africa, and we are excited that we have a social summit that all social and innovators and entrepreneurs should attend. But we find that we don't have the resources to take our people there. They want to go there, but they can't go there. So I think within Africa, at least, that I know it's not only Africa, we need a fund, not money from out, but our own maybe internal fund, to ensure that when there are collaborative global things or regional things that are key for all of us, we can at least send a big delegation that represents the others. That's important. It's part of collaboration, appreciating ourselves and the work that we're doing. And I'm happy to say that we have been officially recognized as a side event for the G20. That's an achievement. And like I said, we'll be there, a few of us, talking about the work we're doing in Africa and at Catalyst now globally. And I believe that we'll have many of those opportunities. The reason why we are actually there is because of the work that Jerome and others are doing in really getting the governments to appreciate us as social innovators. Others would not have been there, would not have been having a side event. So I don't want to say that it just happened, just that there's a lot of effort that has gone for us to be in that position that we are in. So we appreciate the work that has been done by Jerome and other social innovators that have been there before us. Thank you.
But now we can showcase it. And I wish
Yes.
we had much more support. And I agree with Wamayu, sorry, jumping in. We do need the financial resources to be able to showcase the amazing stuff and the amazing collaborations and write about it. Companies do so much and they talk so much. We do so much and we talk so much. So we need to shift that equation,
Yeah. Excellent. And we need to be proud of who you are. I keep on saying we're not proud enough. We are shy as social innovators. I mean, that's why we are not going knocking doors, because we don't feel that we have what it takes, and yet we do have what it takes. So encourage social entrepreneurs to stand up tall and knock all doors that they need to knock, because we have what it takes. Yeah, thank you.
That's so well, Sam. So in the last few minutes, I'd just like you, just to use the couple of minutes the way you want, but perhaps one thing is actually, if you're talking to this audience here, to motivate them not only to go to the sessions this week of Catalyzing Change, but actually what questions should they be asking? What difficult questions and challenges should they be asking? And feel free also to, as David said, like string together, there's threads between you, what powerful messages have come out of this. But so what would you say to the audience in a couple of minutes each?
I mean, go ahead.
Yes.
I'll wait.
Sorry. When you attend the sessions that have been presented to us through this week, go with an open mind, because there are very many new things that you will learn, because we know a lot, as individuals and as organizations, but go with an open mind and expect to learn, because you're going to learn a lot. And even carry a notebook so that you write down all those new things that you learn, and post this week, you will find that you will use them in either personally or in your organization. Thank you.
David.
So, one of these games that we've all played at times is kind of conference or workshop or meeting bingo, where you create a board and you have 20 questions on the board, and on each square on the board, you put a word: trust, collaboration, whatever those words are. And then you tick them off as the thing goes through. And I think to make it as interesting and as creative for each of us as possible as we go through the week, what I like to do is put the words of the things that I think are, or you would think are absolutely essential if we are going to succeed at solving some of the deep structural systemic problems in the world, and see how often those things come up. So put half of the boxes with those things, and then the other half of the boxes with the more conventional ways of thinking, and then look at what gets ticked off and what doesn't after every session. And the good sessions, I would argue, are the ones that get to the deeper issues. The more conventional sessions that don't penetrate are the ones that are going to have the more ticked off of the other. So that would just be a game you could play to keep it interesting and help you see what's going on and to what extent are the right ideas being surfaced in the sessions. Quote unquote right. I mean, we all have our own perspective on these things, but I'm inviting you to create your own and in a way test your own, your own mental framework in each of these sessions.
Thanks, David. Jeroen.
For me, it's one word: collaborate. So I suggest, like Vamayu saying, go, listen, learn, and then say, these are the 4 things that people, or 7 people, or 10 people I want to collaborate with. And when we used to evaluate this, when I used to evaluate the success of Catalyzing Change Week, I would say how many new collaborations emerged from this? How many new connections happened from CCW? So for me, it will be just connect with people. I hope you all have been DMing, or whatever that's the right word, direct messaging through this thing. And I hope you all are getting new ideas on how to collaborate, be it over the next 5 days on mental health, on agriculture. So I hope some people have reached out to Vamayu saying, we want to be part of Africa Forward or Agri. Someone has reached out to David, to you. I hope when we end Catalyzing Change Week, we are having the roster of change, we say these were the 15, 20, 30 new collaborations which emerged. Because that's the true sense of CCW. The collaborations, the strategic partnerships, and the alliances which will help people shape and change their lives. That's what it's all about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the 3 of you. I mean, super stimulating, high level and practical insights, whether it's with the glue that bring people together. I love that potted history, David. I mean, I learned a ton actually just listening to you there. And
can I just add a geeky measurement guy comment at the end? When you do create a new collaboration, thanks to the week, please let the Secretariat know, because otherwise, we might miss it. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, does it make a sound? We need to make a big sound. So let us know. Thank you.
Super well said. Super well said. And Drew, your phrase, from crisis comes opportunity. Well, we've certainly got a bit of a crisis. So let's generate a few opportunities this week. All right, I'm going to pass back to Sanjoy, who's the creative force behind this whole week. Sanjoy.
Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you, David, Dr. Vamayu, Jeru, and thank you all for watching. This is really so interesting and such a great way to start the Catalyzing Change Week. As Jeru said, we need to look at collaboration. As Dr. Vamayu said, we need to celebrate it. We don't celebrate enough. We're not confident enough a lot of the time in sort of saying, we know we can bring about change. We are the change. And thank you, David, for saying that this is our time. And the more we're able to understand this, the easier, or well, the less difficult it's going to be. Nothing is easy. Change does not happen easily, but we will get there by working together and collaborating. And Colin, thank you so much for moderating the session. Remember to continue to watch the rest of the sessions today and also all of the sessions in the coming days. Thank you so much and goodbye.